A man wakes up in a strange place, not realizing where he is and how he got here. He tries to get through to someone, but from behind the door he is advised to shut up and calm down. The invisible interlocutor informs the guy that he's been drugged with substances, so he's going to be sick for the next few days, but now it's time for him to work and he says goodbye. Joe is trying to make sense of everything that has happened to him when he hears a small crack on the door open, into which several bags of food fall. The guy runs to it and asks the security guard to help him. The man has a pregnant wife at home who needs his help, so he needs to get out of here as soon as possible. He is ordered several times to move away from the door and not to put his hand in the gap, but the man doesn't listen and is hit hard on the hand. He cries, repeating that he didn't deserve this and shouldn't be here. Later, Joe bandages the brush with his tie and surveys the strange place. He picks up groceries and a small water bottle, but barely a man is about to taste the food when a siren begins to sound, followed by the voice of the corporation. Malard Corporation welcomes him to a refresher course where he is sure to become the best version of himself. Joe asks for information, but the neighbor advises the guy to shut up because his questions will remain unanswered anyway. The countdown to midnight begins, so Joe should enjoy the last hours of peace. The man doesn't know what that means. And then from behind the walls begin to come the screams of people who order Joe to shut up and let them rest. The invisible interlocutor advises the guy to accept that this place is Malard, and now he should try to get some sleep because tomorrow will be the longest day of his life. Joe sits down against the wall and he hears the man's screams coming from the wall, begging him not to do this and his job will be overdone. But he is being picked up and taken somewhere. Joe covers his ears so that he doesn't hear the screams, and once again the artificial intelligence begins to speak, assuring Joe that everything that is happening is aimed at restoring his peace of mind. Finally, the sun rises over the room. A male voice congratulates Joe on a beautiful day and reminds him that the cells must be kept clean or he will be punished. The neighbor behind the wall advises him to obey orders and calls the night's incident a motivational speech that he will soon get used to. Joe picks up trash and throws it into a hole in the floor covered by a door. Suddenly, he sees something strange under his feet and pulling at the strings, he discovers that it is hair, underneath which turns out to be a human skull. Joe screams in horror, but the neighbor knows that many people have died here, so Joe will have to get used to it. The neighbor reminds him of the contract the guy signed when he was hired. Malard gives it to everyone, but few people finish reading the small text to the end. And the sooner he gets into a rhythm, the easier the days will be for him. He just needs to do his job. At this point, I's voice comes on and Joe interrupts him, yelling that he's worked for the corporation for 10 years and demands to be let out immediately. But Malard announces that today is the start of a professional development seminar. His productivity has plummeted recently and now he has an opportunity to fix it. Joe was once a model employee, but he gradually stopped appreciating the corporation and all it gave him. So now he has a new job that will run from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. All this time he has to push the mill. 1 point per full turn. His daily norm is 50 turns. Do less than that, he will be penalized. Mallard's motto is that enough is not good and he must try his best to keep his place, his salary, his corporate apartment and his very life. Malard wishes him success. Joe tries to talk the artificial intelligence into letting him out, but his neighbor advises him not to waste his energy. At the moment he needs to survive, and for that he must work. So Joe takes up the wheel. At first it is very difficult for him, but the man strains with all his might, and the wheel begins to move. Malard congratulates him on his first turn, offering a virtual toast to his first victory. Joe keeps pushing, listening to the corporation's commercials. Finally, the end of work signal sounds, and Malard congratulates him on completing his first day of self-improvement labor. He has exceeded the norm, and that is a very good thing. During the night, Joe hears a woman's screams as Malard announces another layoff. Later, a neighbor, learning that Joe has doubled the norm, advises him not to take such a pace. Joe can't understand the meaning. He didn't fulfill the norm, punishment, and if he did, but was last among all, death. His interlocutor advises him not to tell him about his norm. They are not friends, and the neighbor will always try to get ahead of him. They all have one thing in common. They were all moving up the career ladder, receiving many bonuses from the company and seemed to be at the top. Joe suddenly starts talking about his wife and the future son they've been waiting so long for, and he ended up here. The neighbor advises to work as hard as possible. It's the only way to survive here, but you can't overdo it either. A new day of work begins. Joe pushes the wheel and remembers when he and his wife were looking at the new house and he promised to work even harder to pay for it. The workday ends and there is a knock on Joe's door and orders him to remove all his clothes. After undressing, he walks out the door and finds himself under a stream of water. After washing himself, he returns to his cell. The next day comes, the weather outside is much hotter and Joe is quickly tired. He asks his neighbor what the mill is and what they are all doing here, and he replies that they are not producing anything, which means the place is empty. There is no purpose or meaning to it. Soon Joe runs out of water and tries to shout to the security guard, but the guard tells him to collect his urine and drink it by filtering it through his sneakers. Joe refuses to do so, and the unseen interlocutor laughs at him. Malard knows how much he needs, and here he shows all he can do. Malard wants to know how far he will go. Joe keeps working, remembering how his wife doubted his ability to pay all the bills, and he promises that their child will have a better life. That evening, Malard notes the growth of his self-knowledge, and he suddenly sees Alex's name cut out. Later, he asks a neighbor who Alex is, and the neighbor calls him a legend who managed to get away from here. The next morning, Malard thanks him for his diligence and gives him a personalized pen and therefore shows him the new norm for the day of 370 laps. Joe is horrified and says all the wrong things, and the corporation explains that people aren't always able to realize their own strengths. It's hard, but that's how the world changes. The signal sounds and Joe gets to work and suddenly notices that the circle is not marked, but there is a cross, which means punishment. 1 cross equals 2 circles, and then the man gives up, but Joe has no intention of doing that. He pushes the circle with his last strength, but his strength leaves him, and when his neighbor finds out the number of circles he has been given, he becomes furious. Joe has racked up an impossible number of laps, and now they will all suffer. Malard announces that he has failed to meet the standard and has let his colleagues down, and after all, taking care of colleagues is the company's main principle, so he will have a new colleague, Kate Stevens. Joe is horrified to see his wife's face on the screen and promises to exceed the plan, just to keep her out of the place. Malard gives him 1 day and turns on the glowing screen above his compartment, not allowing the man to rest. A new workday arrives and Joe takes up the wheel. Suddenly, he sees himself in front of him. The second Joe laughs at his hopes, for he has worked all his life hoping his efforts would pay off. He's screwed up and should give up. But Joe keeps pushing the wheel, and at exactly 10 o'clock he hits 370 revolutions. The corporation congratulates him and rescinds the fine. As motivation, the man is shown footage of his wife with an infant in her arms. Joe cries tears of joy. In the morning, he asks his neighbor to tell him everything he knows about the place, and the neighbor remembers his son, whom he only saw as a child because he spent all the rest of his time at work, and advises him to examine Joe's blind spot. Joe goes to the wall and after much observation finds the erased spot. Remembering the pen he had been given, he uses it to chisel the wall and overnight widens the hole a little. Another day comes, and Joe gets to work, and at night he chisels the wall again. This goes on for many days and nights, and eventually he manages to make a hole that he can fit through. Joe climbs through, but finds himself in total darkness, where a man suddenly appears who pats him on the head and wishes him sweet dreams. Joe regains consciousness in his cell, the hole is patched and the AI voice is heard again. Malard is disappointed, but nonetheless willing to give him one last opportunity. He is so caught up in his own desires that he fails to see the bigger picture, and so his neighbor is punished and his work increased to 1,000 turns a day. Joe finds out that his neighbor's leg was broken and now he won't even score 1 point. And afterward, the man confesses that they are being controlled by a computer he created himself. The first algorithm he wrote improved itself and created the second algorithm, and the third one, and so on. And now people don't know how it works, and then Joe realizes that if they don't work, everyone will have 0 points, and then what will the intelligence do? Joe shouts to the others and tells them about his idea. People respond, supporting his suggestion of not working, but the workday begins and everyone takes to pushing wheels because they are afraid of dying. Joe tries to change the neighbors' minds, but realizing that all to no avail, also starts spinning the wheel. In the evening, they talk to the neighbor and he tells them his name is Alex. He was also out of the cell, but he was returned, so it is impossible to get out of here. At night, Joe hears Malard dismissing Alex. In the morning, a voice wakes him up and to keep his spirits up shows the man footage of his wife and his already walking son. The man yells an insult at Malard and is told he is fired. Just then the doors open and a crowd of clerks enters, standing to the sides and looking at the man in silence. But then a man in uniform comes inside and confesses that he loves being fired. The 12 clerks witness each one. The man charges a syringe. The man hopes that a house on a street will soon become vacant, where a single mother lives with her young son. At this point, Joe can't take it anymore and rushes in to beat him up. Malard informs about the security guard's failed assignment and that he will be fired and Joe will be promoted. The man stops, feeling the blood on his hands, but the mutilated security guard asks him to continue. Joe says that he is not a monster and intends to leave, and at that moment, Joe finds himself in an office where several employees are sitting and his interlocutor congratulates him on passing the career simulator. It was all within an hour and his son hadn't been born yet. He was struggling with middle managers but was stuck at level 8. Malard realized he was too good. His productivity has increased, his personality has increased, and the coup he has pulled off is over the top. He is a leader who thinks outside the box. Joe peels off his suction cups, but his companion ignores it and calls to see his new office. There are a large number of positions at Malard and one can spend years climbing upward. Soon they get to the right floor, but Joe keeps remembering the time spent in the simulation. There's the office with the new gadgets. Joe is also expecting a pay raise and other bonuses. On the desk is a contract, according to which disclosure of his experiences in the simulation will lead to immediate dismissal. Joe signs it and is assured that Malard is his company forever. The man sits down at his desk, looks at a picture of his wife, and calls Kate. She is surprised and the man struggles to hold back tears as he recalls his misery and promises to burn the place down. An unusual philosophical movie that reveals the problems of career growth and work. Many people start living to work, forgetting about life itself.